not a married man. And the Grail office, the Grail has reverted from the stone back to the chalice, and the Grail office is not held by the Grail Maiden anymore, but by a kind of group of Knights Templar, all men who have taken vows of chastity. So he's really corrupted and misunderstood the whole thing. Nietzsche hated him for it. This ended their relationship. Nietzsche just utterly hated it. In fact, I have a couple of words of Nietzsche that might be, Nietzsche's always fun to hear, and maybe it'll be, he says of Wagner's Parsifal, what could this Parsifal be? Must we actually recognize in this, as people have sometimes said of me, the product of a hatred of knowledge, intellect, and sensuality gone mad? A curse in one breath of hate upon both the senses and the mind? An apostasy and reversion to sickly Christian obscurantist ideals? And even finally a work of self-denial, self-cancellation on the part of an artist, who up to this had been dedicated with all the might of his will, and Nietzsche had been his follower and his absolute worshiper up until this final opera, who up to this had been dedicated with all the might of his will to just the opposite, in the superlative spirituality and sensuality of his art. And not only his art, but also his life. Can it be that a hatred of life has got the better of him as it got the better of Flaubert? For Parsifal is a work of malice and revenge, a secret poison against the preconditions of life, a wicked work. The sermon of chastity is an incitement to pathology, and I would despise anyone who did not feel in Parsifal an attack upon morality itself. That's Wagner's Parsifal, and it's a very thorough job that Nietzsche has done on that. And it's musically, it's probably some of Wagner's best music. It's simply extraordinarily beautiful for anyone who likes Wagner's music, but the libretto is simply ridiculous. So,
what inspired him, though? What did Wagner say? Where did he get it from?
I don't know about the changes. I do know that he based it on Wolfram's text. I don't know what was in his mind. There may have been some last-minute deathbed conversion to Christianity in his mind. I don't know what was going on. I really don't. But I just want to conclude then with a couple of words about T.S. Eliot's 1922 poem, The Wasteland, that will bring us into the 20th century. Recall that in addition to the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, we have in 1848 the publication of Marx's Communist Manifesto. You are to blame your life now on the capitalists. Capitalists are exploiting you. You have no responsibility for the adventure of your life. Feel free to attack and disparage. He's followed in 1859 by Darwin, The Origin of the Species. Not only is it the fault of the capitalists, it's the fault of nature, really. And we're all bound by the law of natural selection to compete for inserting our genes in females. And that's to be blamed as the cause of all our sorrows. Darwin, as Jose Ortega y Gasset remarks in his beautiful Meditations on Quixote, Darwin sweeps heroes off the face of the earth. And then Freud's 1900 publication of The Interpretation of Dreams, you can blame your parents now. Don't worry about it. It's all the fault of... So we have now, in this creation of these stories, or these philosophies in the 19th century, a deferral of the responsibility for the individual adventure of your life onto anything else but yourself. Society, the environments, parents, and this can also create a wasteland. And indeed it did. So T.S. Eliot responds with two poems, The Wasteland and The Hollow Man. And this is precisely what he means by the Hollow Man. We in the 20th century have been robbed of our autonomy and our capacity and responsibility for shaping the adventure of our own lives by these men. And that has rendered us hollow inside. We're like puppets reacting, or like Pavlov's dog, reacting to external stimuli and without any capability apparently for spontaneous creative action. That's the Hollow Man. The Wasteland is based on Jesse L. Weston's From Ritual to Romance, which T.S. Eliot read, and he brought in all this Grail material. And his Grail quest then finally takes him to India. By the end of the poem, we're safely in India, and in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, he finds there what he thinks is the solution, an ethical solution to the 20th century wasteland, which I think is not inconsistent with Wolfram's 12th century solution. Wolfram emphasizes the virtues of courage, compassion, and loyalty, as we'll see, is Parsifal's driving ethic. T.S. Eliot, deriving inspiration from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishads, in a passage where the thunder speaks and it utters a syllable, da, And each of the three worlds of the gods, men, and the anti-gods hear in that syllable a different word that is respectively their proper aim for restoring harmony to the wasteland of the cosmos. The first word is give. Give yourself over to something greater than yourself. Come out of your little ego and open up, to the song of the universe. Here's something else other than your personal Freudian analysis on the couch. There are other huge forces at work in nature, and if we listen to them, we'll hear them, and they'll speak to us and reconnect us with the Grail. Sympathize. Sympathize. This is the compassionate solution that Wolfram was the first to insert as the proper question that the Grail Knight should have asked. Not all the other texts are. The quester forgets to ask what's the origin of these things? Who does the Grail serve? Wolfram says, no, it was his failure to, moved by spontaneity, to ask what was hurting the Grail King, the wound. He fails to express that compassion and puts his ego ahead of that, what people will think of him. So sympathize with the suffering of others. And then finally, control. Control, self-control, not a reckless giving to Darwinian greed and the struggle for the capitalist horde, but self-control. You don't need everything. So this is T.S. Eliot's solution to the wasteland that he finds in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and that brings us home to the 20th century. And of course, the Grail myth, even after T.S. Eliot has just impacted and exploded all through the popular culture. We've got all kinds of film versions and popular bestsellers, and it's more alive than it has ever been, perhaps since the Middle Ages. And it's still with us. And I hope that in this sort of action-packed sketch I will have conveyed a sense of the Grail myth is the central myth of Northern Europe in contradistinction to anywhere else, and America by extension, and that it's still with us. So I'll end there. So do we want to do questions and discussion or a break for lunch, or it's up to you?
We've got about 20 minutes for questions.
20 minutes? Okay.
Do you think that the quest, because of this popularity of the Grail with the masses, has to do with now the quest is for the heart and the soul, the Grail is the blood of Christ, and that all this interest in extraterrestrial and angelic presences and everything, that people are striving for a connection with something larger than the human form?
Yeah, I've had a suspicion for a long time. I've been thinking a lot about the whole UFO mythology and the fascination with angels and all of that, and
I think it's connected.
I haven't thought a lot about it to give a really articulate response, but my guess is that it has something to do with this wasteland condition of us being so cut off from a sense of connection to the Grail or the divine, that we're so starved from it that our unconscious, which is filled with these forces and waiting for them, as Rilke talks about, to turn our love towards them, these angels, that they sort of overtake us and just almost against our will. Then we get these abduction stories of people who have spent so much of their life not listening to themselves that finally their unconscious takes revenge and they're abducted, in this visionary, hallucinogenic experience. That's my guess. But. Sure.
When I read, Marx and Darwin and Freud, and one of the things that struck me was a little bit different than what you were talking about. Was that as each one of these authors brought to fore their point of view, it separated humans and humanity and each individual from certain supernatural tendencies. That I'll be taken care of by society, I'll be taken care of. My body is separate from the animals, therefore I'm very special. My will is my own. And then, of course, Freud comes along and says, well, the unconscious actually has more control. And so there was less and less control. And there was, the point that I'm trying to make is that, or the way I'm feeling is that humankind was requested to rationalize